Mike, I thought sure when we put you on the agenda, we would pack the house. They're all out watching on our live stream, I guess.
I'm much better on TV.
Much better on radio? Yeah.
I have a face for radio.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Well, I think it's 5 o'clock. I'll call us to order. Summer, if you will call the roll.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Don't see Commissioner Sirigusa. Commissioner Roberts? Here. Commissioner Stallings? Here. Commissioner Orr?
Here.
And Mayor Mason.
Here. Item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to discuss? Okay. Item number 3.1, presentation on municipal government by Mike Fina of the Oklahoma Municipal League. I might say something here before we start. Mike is the executive director of OML. I think most of you up here know that. At the new officers event that we went to with Commissioner Patterson, Gerald and I heard Mike speak, did an opening that I'd never heard before. And we both left there and said, man, I think everybody needs to hear that. So you were kind enough to agree to come up here and do that again. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything that OML does. I know when you get outside of city government, a lot of people don't know, but they are the organization that we go to when we have challenges. They are the organization that oversees the OMAG as well, which we do all of our insurance through. So it's a big part of city government. We appreciate everything that you guys do.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that kind opening. So I'm going to talk a little bit about OML tonight too. So thank you. I will tell you, this is one of my favorite presentations that I give. One, I get to talk about myself a lot. One of my favorites. Just kidding. I do get to talk about myself, but I have a background in this, and that stretches back that we'll talk about. And a lot of this is just the world according to Mike, and it's kind of stuff that take it if it's useful. I hope it helps you guys. If it's not, you can set it aside. If you really love it, I guess you can, put it on stone tablets and put it out in front of City Hall if you want. But let's go through it, and I'll let you guys judge. So. What is OML and who's this guy? I'm going to start with who this guy is. But first of all, there is a test in this. I want you guys, everybody, look at that picture and just remember it. I'm not going to talk about it yet, but I just want you to remember that picture because it's going to play an important role here later in my presentation. I'm going to talk about my background just a little bit. I won't spend too much time on it, but I believe when you're a public speaker, you do have to establish some kind of credibility in what you're talking about. So that's why I talk about my background just a little bit. I started working in government in 1999 at the House of Representatives. I worked in the media office. My very first job was as a speechwriter. It was the first and only speechwriter for the Oklahoma House of Representatives because there's 101 of them. And that's a big job for a speechwriter when you have 101 politicians working for them. Most politicians love to give speeches, and very few of them really like to write them. So I was pretty busy, and it didn't really work. I needed about 15 speechwriters to do that job. So they kind of disbanded the speechwriter part, and then I was just working in the media office. Spent some time as a deputy director of that, and then my final job at the House of Representatives was press secretary for the Speaker of the House. After that, I went to the State Tourism Department, where I was the communications director and the spokesperson for the Tourism Department. Fun job. One of the most influential things happened to me when I worked at the Tourism Department. I woke up one day and the governor had fired my boss. Which is kind of scary at any time that happens. But it really turned into something pretty cool because about a week later, the governor announced that former Governor George Nye was going to be the interim director. Governor Nye came in and he said, I'm only going to do this for 8 months. Everyone was like, that's a weird number. He said, well, that's when he was the interim president at UCO. That was the number that worked for him, so he decided that was just the number he wanted to spend there. So that's why it came for at an odd time. But I want to tell you a quick story about that and why it was so influential. Governor Nye everybody's seen Governor and I speak. Most of you guys have probably met Governor and I. In fact, I remember at one time I drove him to Enid when I worked for him. Governor and I comes in the first day. He brings in kind of the executive team and puts us at a big table, and he's telling us about all the things that we're going to do and this and that. And then towards the end, he said, "Oh, by the way, I've got all these speaking engagements around the state, and I'm going to need someone to drive me." And I look around the table, and immediately everybody's head falls. And I thought, no, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. And I was like, "I'll do it, Governor." So I spent the next 8 months driving that man from one corner of the state to the other to every speaking engagement. At the time, he's in his 90s now. He doesn't quite do as much speaking, but then he was speaking almost every other day. And I love my time with him. And I learned so much. And my favorite part of being with Governor and I is, well, two things. One, when I'd be driving him, he would say, "Mike, I'm going to take a little nap. I don't want you to talk to me." And then it would take about 30 seconds, and then he would start talking to me. And he was always like to tell me stories, but the best is when he would say, "This one wasn't in the book," and then he would tell me a story. The best one he told me was going to, I think I'm okay to tell this story. He said he went to the Democratic National Convention, which is appropriate since it's going on right now, but he went, it was in Austin, Texas, and it was Jimmy Carter was the president. I think it would have been when Jimmy Carter was nominated to be president. And so Governor, at that time, there was one person on, or I think he said two people on his detail. They decided they wanted to go to 6th Street, which is kind of the entertainment area there in Austin. And they were walking down 6th Street, and as he put it, he said, a lady of the night came running up to him before his security could do anything, and she had on big red lipstick, kissed him right on the mouth, and then looked at him and said, "I get to go tell all my friends that I kissed Jimmy Carter." And he said he looked back at her and said, "Yes, you did." So yeah, I love my time with Governor. I learned a lot. It was probably the most influential part of my career. After the tourism department, in that time frame, I got elected to city council in the city of Piedmont. A year later, I was elected mayor. Then I left the tourism department to work for the Corporation Commission. Does anyone deal with the Corporation Commission? Does anyone have to deal with that? You do. Okay, so you're going to get this. If you want to know where the economy of the state of Oklahoma happens, it's not at the Capitol, it's at the Corporation Commission. Every big thing we do, oil and gas, telecom, all those things are governed actually at the Corporation Commission. It was the most complicated job I've ever had, but really took a lot from that. After that, my last job in government was chief of staff for Jerry Askins, who's the former lieutenant governor, if you guys remember Jerry from Duncan. At that point, I was kind of tired of state government and the state government salary, so I went to the private sector, and it turned out that experience at Corporation Commission was what really was valuable out there, dealing with people that needed help with regulatory government. I spent the time doing that, and then I got a telecom client. And it was a really interesting time with this telecom client that the guy was always in trouble. And they hired me to try and keep him out of trouble. And we did a pretty good job with it. And then he got indicted on wire fraud charges. You never want to have someone you work for that happens to. Nothing to do with me, so let's just make that clear. But the guy was really wealthy at a young age, and he probably didn't need to have all that money at a young age. And his lawyers, he had a team of lawyers, they said, someone's got to run this company. And it was one of those things where I said, I've got my consulting company's doing well. I really don't have time for that. And I go, besides, it would be really expensive for me to drop all this. And so it was one of those things where well, try me. And I was like, it was one of those things where I wrote down a number and slid it to him, like, oh, that's no big deal, we'll do that. So literally, in 2 days later, I'm managing this large telecom company that is in Oklahoma. Well, it's in several states, but has offices in Oklahoma and Memphis. And I'm flying back and forth. And then the guy, I'm trying to get through the story because we need to get to this. The guy that ends up getting exonerated on all these charges, which is kind of crazy because I thought he was going to jail for sure. But he gets exonerated. He comes back and he decides, I'm done with this. I don't ever want to put myself in that position. And so he sells the company to a publicly traded company. This is not my world. I've never dealt with that. I was lost. And that company was based in Las Vegas. And my life turned into this Oklahoma City, Memphis, Las Vegas, or vice versa. That was my life. I was flying. Okay, this is why I wanted to tell you that particular part of the story. When I was mayor, and at the time I was working for Jerry Askins, the executive director of OML would come and bring her legislative team, and they would always put their bags in my office because here's a mayor working in the building. They have a home base. I was happy to do it. And I remember I was helping him work at a particular issue, and I was watching that director, and I was like, if she ever retires, I'd love to have that job. I just think it seems like a really good job. Okay, flash forward. I'm sitting in the Las Vegas airport about 7:30 at night. You learn to fly out of Las Vegas at odd times because at 7:30 on a Friday, everybody's already there getting drunk or doing whatever they're doing, and the airport's empty. And I'm sitting there exhausted. And I believe the good Lord knows when we've had enough. And he looked down on me in that night because I got a notice on my phone that the job from OML was open. And I remembered back to that day watching her work, and I said, I really want that job. And I applied, and I got it, and my life has been fulfilled ever since. This is the best job I've ever had because I get to work with you guys. That's not me kissing up to you. It is the honest truth of all the things I've done, and now you know everything I've done in government. The best place I've ever been was being mayor and city council member of Piedmont. Because when I would make a decision in Piedmont, and you guys know this, when I would make a decision, I would see the fruits of my labor immediately. I could see the change. When I worked at the Capitol for all those years, I couldn't see the change from the Capitol, and I promise you there's not a legislator sitting up there that can see the change from where they're at. You guys can see the change from here. That's why I love municipal government, and that's why I love what I do. So that's the background of me. Let's talk about OML real quick. So if you don't know, I had to change my slide. For the longest time, it said we were 110 years old. The truth is we're 111 years old. People find that, I love saying that because a lot of people find that surprising that we've been around almost as long as Oklahoma's been a state, doing the exact same thing, being here to support you guys and prop you up and help you do your job the best that you can. We are managed by a 24-member board that's made up of municipalities of varying sizes. And it doesn't matter if you're David Holt, who's actually Craig Freeman comes to the meetings more, the city manager, but it doesn't matter if you're Craig Freeman on there or you're Craig Parham, who is the mayor of Amber, Oklahoma. They all have equal voices on OML. All of you have equal voices on OML. So we're truly there just to support you guys. There's 587 municipalities in the state of Oklahoma, and we do our best to support every one of them. I will tell you that when you get to about number 480, 485, after that, we have some really small communities, like less than 500 people. We have communities with less than 10 people, just so you know. So there's varying sizes, but we're there to support all of them. This is kind of the silos of OML. The big thing that you guys probably see more of everything is our legislative efforts. You guys have a really amazing lobbyist, Kurt Rogo. He was actually, when I was mayor, he was our state rep for Piedmont. We used to share that with you guys in Enid, which is kind of funny because we're 85 miles apart. But legislative, we do. I have federal on there. We do federal when we need to do federal. The last big federal thing that we did was the ARPA project. We spent a lot of time lobbying Congress to make sure that we got those ARPA funds in Oklahoma. I will tell you the biggest success that we have with that. If you guys remember, there were two financial packages happened. The first one was the CARES Act. That was under the Trump administration. That one, they decided that it would be better to give that money directly to governors and let the governors decide where that money went. That didn't work out so well for municipalities. The governor allocated about $50 million for all municipalities. Didn't go very far. Under the Biden administration, I'm not playing favorites or politics here. Under the Biden administration, they did the ARPA, and because what we learned from the CARES Act, we said, listen, don't give the money directly to governors. Don't give the money to the legislature. Give it directly to municipalities. We can make it go farther. Well, we didn't know that we were going to get what we asked for, and we didn't know what that meant, but that's what happened. And if you, especially your Gerald and your team knows this, when you guys got your money direct because a lot of the municipalities, if you were over 50,000 or close to that 50,000 number, you could get your money direct. If you were under that, there wasn't a mechanism to get money from Congress to the municipality. I know that sounds weird, but you just can't write a check and hand it to a municipality. There's just too much bureaucracy I can talk today, in the middle of that. So the state looked at OML and said, how do we do this? So when a city would call, thinking they were calling the state to say, okay, I have questions with that, they were calling OML. because the state went to us and said, how do you do it? Because we know how to speak municipal government. So there's some of the big federal things. And then, every year you hear, I know Kurt comes here and talks to you about our legislative agenda, and I know he does a really good job of it. We work with Kurt all the time. So you guys know what we do on that front. Keep moving on. Legal, we're never your attorneys, but I've got a team of attorneys and I've got a team of researchers. When you guys have questions that are statutory based, we can help you with that. I'm always going to tell you this one thing though. We're not your attorney. We can't legally be your attorney, and you should always seek your attorney's legal advice. Who's our attorney? Is he here? So I'm so sorry. I apologize. That was bad. Bad Mike.
Doesn't matter.
No. Well, there's a lot of men in your deal, but some of the best attorneys I know that are female in municipal government. But you need to talk to her, okay? This is your lifeline right here, so don't ever forget that. And then if you see, I changed my slide a little bit. If you have issues, we have an inquiry service, and you're always welcome to call OML. I would just say in Enid, really your first stop is ours with Gerald. You've got a fine city manager that knows his business, and so I want to always be a support to you, but we're a support to him, but you always start with him when you have those kind of inquiry questions, because I know you have capable folks here in Enid. So, okay, we're going to keep pressing on. Really, if you focus on the research and data side, we provide a lot of reports that are just helpful for you to do your job. You'll see some standard reports that we do every year, like the salary and benefit. But then if there's special things going on that we need to research, like when we were dealing with all of the medical marijuana stuff, you saw a lot of stuff that we put out there for you guys because there was just so much to research and provide information on that. So, and we'll do whatever's current as far as what's happening in the world. And then on the other side, just OML events. Our conference is coming up September 10th through the 12th in Tulsa. So you guys always send a big contingency there, so I'd love to see all of you there. And then if you look at that picture down there, I just want to point out that the guy on the right, not the younger gentleman, that's the mayor of North Enid. And I don't want to pick any fights here, but he said they were first. He says it all the time that they were first. So I don't know if he's about to do a hostile takeover, but you need to watch out for that one. So Jason Dawkins. Okay, let's jump into this because I know you guys got other things to do. Remember, I know you guys are all elected. This is what I do at the New Officers Institute. I have kind of adjusted it, but I think it still reigns true no matter how long you've sat on this board, so the things that we deal with. All right, so here are like I said, this is just the world according to Mike. These are the things that I have experienced in my life, whether as an elected official or working in government, things that hopefully can help you guys just do your job better or maybe put some perspective on things. The first thing is, I always like to lead with this. You are the most influential elected officials in the state. That is hard for municipal elected officials to understand. But let me put it into perspective. We have 587 municipalities. So on an average of 5 members per council, that's roughly 3,000 municipal elected officials in the state of Oklahoma. You have 77 counties, so times 3 county commissioners, 101 state representatives, 48 state senators, and 1 governor. If we got into a street fight with these guys, it wouldn't even be fair. That's how much influence that you guys have. And the thing that you always have to remember, this is the important part about this. You were elected by the exact same people who elected them. The legislators, the governor, the same people voted for you. Do you remember when we were in grade school, and I don't see it as much anymore, but do you remember kind of the pyramid of power where they would have the governor, the president at the top, and then the Congress and this and that, and down at the bottom, who was down at the bottom? Us, local government. I look at that 2 different ways. I think either that pyramid should be flipped, or you can look at it this way. We are the foundation of government. We are the foundation of pretty much where government starts, and it really should be where government starts and government ends. I believe that strongly in local control. But don't ever forget how much influence you have, and that's part of what OML does. Being able to bring your voices together to create that one voice is really important. I know you got elected here in Enid, but that doesn't mean that you don't have responsibilities outside of this community, because if we let them run rampant at the Capitol and they pass a bunch of preemption bills and nobody stands up and says no, we will have no authority. That's why we try and stick to this single voice, and we want you guys to be bound together that way. So, yes, you do govern here, but remember, you do have responsibilities as an elected official outside of this community as well. So, keep moving on. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. Listen to a citizen, but lead for all citizens. Okay? This is hard to understand, too. Tonight, we are not packed. I really thought, Gerald, we would be when my name got on the agenda, but there's nothing controversial going on today in Enid. That's why this place isn't packed, okay? What I experienced, and I have one, I love this story. There was a lady who was a huge supporter of mine when I was running for council and then for mayor, and she had one issue. She wanted us to build a brand-new animal shelter that was a no-kill shelter. She was one of those, and I'm a dog lover. I always say I have a Great Dane named Bodie. He's 170 pounds of love. I wouldn't give that guy up for the world. But when it came to paving roads, building water and sewer versus building a new animal control center or a shelter, I couldn't do it. She beat me up all the time. She would come to the meeting, she would take her 3 minutes, and she would, every meeting, reminded us about that. She made a lot of noise. She would be in the paper, and she would write. But the problem is that she just showed up to the meetings, and she did that. And I could never, there was no way that the council was ever going to be able to satisfy what she wanted. We could have built the Taj Mahal of animal control centers, and it wouldn't have made her happy. But she was there, and people listened to her. And then when they're starting to tell you how bad the mayor is, and they don't maybe hear because he won't build an animal shelter, they just hear how bad the mayor is, or how bad the council is. So remember that when you're up here governing tonight, there is a whole, what's our population now in Enid?
About 51,000.
51,000. That means there's over 50,000 people that are out there living their lives expecting you guys to do what you do up here because they elected you to do it, and they don't care about coming up here to make noise. But you represent them just the same. You represent them as much as you represent anyone that's here tonight. So don't ever lose sight of that. You go on. This is the one that's always difficult for people, and it plays off of what I just said. This is hard to understand. Meetings are not for the public. They're for your municipal business, okay? So, just like I said, when people are, they elect you, so actually they don't have to come up here. If they come up here, and because there's something controversial going on, you've got them off their couch. Something's going awry. Something's going right. Now, here's the other thought about it. I can tell you from visiting councils, talking to council members, that also the mob doesn't make up your community. Just because you have 10 people that are well-spoken that show up here at the same time and they get up and they use their time, that doesn't mean that that's what the rest of the community finds. We did some research on just municipal elections. We did some polling, actually. And the legislature always wants to put a higher threshold when we do any kind of municipal election. They want us to do 60% because they think that 52% passage on a bond just isn't right because half the community didn't care about that. Well, let me tell you what the truth about that 52% is. That means that a majority of your community did want that. There was probably about 15% that didn't like it because they don't like any kind of taxes, they don't like any kind of government intrusion. And then the rest of the percentage, I don't know math that well, whatever that is, are people that just didn't care. They didn't care, they sat at home because what they care about is that when they go home, that life is good, that they're not impeded on by other people, by government, by whatever. They just want life to be good, and they don't pay attention. I don't even know that that's apathy. That's just human nature, okay? You're never going to get 100% of your community interested in whatever you're doing. It's just almost a virtual impossibility because some people just like to live their lives. And they might be excited when they see that you built a new arena or you built a new park, but they didn't pay attention when you were voting for it. But hey, good job. That's how they look at it. So don't take offense to a 52, 53%. And if you're passing things at 60%, you're killing it as it is. Make sure I didn't miss anything that I want. Yeah, I always like to say this, that the only thing you get for showing up to a meeting is a gold star for being a good citizen, but that's about it. And don't let the mob govern. Don't let them govern. They weren't elected to govern. You were elected to govern. And councils fall for that all the time because people will come up here and they sound great. They've got a really good argument. But the truth is that they weren't elected. And if you're letting them govern from this here, you're not doing your job. Hope that part sunk in. All right. You always know more than they do. This is, when I talk about people that will come up here and sound like they know exactly what they're talking about, that they've done their research, they know, they've read the internet, and of course they know everything about it, and they're going to tell you how to do the job. I had a couple that came to a city council meeting. Now, you guys don't have to deal with this because you're well over the 5,000, but at the time, Piedmont was just right on the 5,000. Actually, we were higher than 5,000, but we weren't to the next census, so we were probably around 7,000. But this couple came, and we were, according to the census, we were under 5,000. So there is a statute that says that counties may maintenance the roads in communities under 5,000. You guys probably never even thought about that because you haven't been around 5,000 in 100 years. But a lot of the communities see that. Well, this couple came to our council meeting, and it was an agenda item, so they got to speak, and they just railed on us saying the county's supposed to be doing this, the state law says this, they're doing it. And so they were getting people riled up, and they thought we were doing something wrong. But the problem was they didn't know the difference between a shall and a may. And they didn't know that we had been fighting with I know just Piedmont, that cities have been fighting with counties about this particular issue for years and years and years. But the counties don't give up their funds. You guys experience that even at 51,000. But these people really made people think that we were doing something wrong because they were so loud. But they didn't know what they were talking about. We did. We knew the facts because we had been a part of it. But they kept saying it so much that it caused us grief. Then in the end, when I finally kind of quartered this couple, it turns out we had a county line road that we shared with Kingfisher County. They lived on the Kingfisher side of it, and they came to the Piedmont City Council and raised Cain wanting the Piedmont. So I'm like, you're not even residents of Piedmont, but they show up at our council meeting. Okay, remember, so I've been talking about people that spew things that aren't true. This is really relevant right now. Okay, remember this picture I asked you guys to focus on? Hey, that picture hangs in the lobby of OML, okay? I asked the first day I was director, I said, what is that picture? And they said, oh, that's when OML was founded, okay? All right, I told you we're 111 years old. We were founded in Ada, Oklahoma with 7 other cities in, what would that year be, 1913, okay? Anybody think that picture is Ada, Oklahoma? Has anyone been to Ada in a while? Leroy, have you been to Ada in a while? Does that look like Ada? No. There's actually high-rise buildings in the background. The dress is not even wouldn't have been in the teens. That's probably in the mid-30s. That is. I don't know where that is. That might as well be New York City because I can't pick one building in there to say, oh, that's Oklahoma City, that's Tulsa. But it's certainly not Ada. But for years, I don't know how long that picture has hung in the lobby of OML, but for years, our staff, everybody said, oh, no, that's when OML was founded. That has become fact when it is obviously not fact. Does that sound familiar in the world we live in today? Yeah. If we allow lies, inaccuracies, just people who are plain wrong but don't know they're plain wrong, if we allow them to continue to do that without checking them, without providing facts, that's what happens. It becomes a fact. So transparency is something that we preach at OML. I don't know that for our entire existence as municipalities that we have been the most transparent group. Sometimes we struggle with transparency. I hope there's no press here listening to that. We've gotten better. We've gotten much better. But I'm telling you, transparency is the savior on this. Being transparent, putting the right information out there, making sure it's factual information is how we stop that kind of behavior. Because I was coming here, and I've done it before, but I got on your website, Gerald. You guys do a really fine job. You've got everything out there. It's easy to find. It's easy to understand. That's the kind of stuff that I need all cities to be doing. But you guys as elected officials, You got to remember that is your easiest ace in the hole, is to just be transparent about everything. Lay it out there, okay? It's frustrating because people, no matter how much fact you put out there, people are still going to call you a liar. People are still going to think you're stealing money. I've never understood this. When I was running for mayor, I thought everybody loved me. Like, everybody told me how great I was. I think it was about 2 days after that. I don't know when I turned into the SOB after I got elected, but for some reason that happens. You get elected and immediately you're the enemy. And I don't know what's in people's psyche why it's like that, but it's a frustrating thing that we all have to deal with. So, but again, truth, honesty, it actually still matters, especially if you're elected official. So laying that truth out there and being transparent about things, like I said, that's your ace in the hole. Everybody's going to be a lawyer and an expert on statutory government. They're going to come up here and they're going to quote things like they're quoting the Bible. Here's my favorite thing that I encountered when I was mayor. So Piedmont's in Canadian County. There's a Canadian County state rep. He's at some kind of luncheon. I forget what the luncheon is, but he comes in, and this guy, I might give it away when I say it. This guy comes in and he's billed as a constitutional expert. He comes into this meeting and he's literally wearing a colonial outfit, has a musket. He's a state rep, a sitting state, not anymore. He comes in and he says, I'm a constitutional scholar. Said it 100 times, and then he gives you his impression of what the Constitution says. After the fact, I was actually rather intrigued. I had just helped, so when I was at Jerry Askin's, we'd done that project where you hand out the pocket constitutions. So I had just finished reading the Constitution. It's not like I read it every night before I go to bed. I mean, of course, I read the Constitution every night before I go, no. But I had just read it, and so I was kind of enthused with the Constitution. So I go up to him afterwards, and I said, Representative, I said, this is really interesting. I said, so how do you become a constitutional scholar? Did you go to law school? Oh, no, I didn't go to law school. Did you study? Is there something that you studied in college? Oh, no, I have a math degree. I was a math teacher. I was like, so how did the Constitution come? He's like, well, I read the Constitution. I was waiting for something to come after that. He read it and he interpreted it himself without, I don't know if he read books or whatever, but he interpreted it himself and he became a constitutional scholar. I just want to give you guys, this is putting the facts out there. That's not how it works. You don't become a constitutional scholar by reading the Constitution. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. And there's been people that have studied the Constitution for hundreds of years, or not quite a couple hundred years, trying to figure out what it says. So some guy in a colonial garb and holding a musket, that's probably the first sign that you know that he's not a constitutional scholar. But he made an entire room full of people believe that he was the smartest person in that room on the Constitution, because he stood up there and said, I'm a constitutional scholar. So beware of what you hear when people stand up here, okay? It is incumbent on you to do that kind of fact checking as elected officials. Your constituents demand that of you. So anyone that comes in here making crazy claims, you need to make sure they're backing it up, okay? But everybody's going to come up and pretend like they are smarter than they probably are. Okay, so be wary of the people, especially someone that comes in here in a costume. That's probably one thing you should really be wary about. All right, now let's get into the really fun stuff. Social media. It's not fact or fiction. Let me tell you what social media is. Social media is simply a place that people interact. It used to be the coffee shop before we had social media. I got elected at the beginning of Facebook. It wasn't as prevalent. And we still did go to the coffee shops. Now that's the new coffee shop. People will stay in there. But the bad part about it is, in the coffee shop, at least those old men that were cranky old men, at least you knew who they were. Now we don't know, because they hide behind fake identities and they say the most horrible things. I wish that I had something in this slide that said, and here's how you deal with it. I don't have the answer yet. I don't know if I'll ever have the answer for you guys on that. It is a reality that we have to deal with. But there are some things that I believe that you can do, and it goes back to what I said earlier. When people stick false things out on Facebook, you don't fight with them. Don't tell them how dumb they are. Just put the truth out there. If they say that the mayor is the biggest crook and he's stealing all the money, put the budget out there and say, prove it. How is that? Because for some reason, when we deal with their money, we're always crooks. I don't know how that happens either. But really, very few instances of that even happening in municipal area. There's too many checks and balances in our government. And the bigger your city gets, it actually will get a lot harder. When I see any kind of fraud in cities, it's usually in really small communities when there's only 2 people watching the books. I would be shocked if I ever saw anything like that in Enid. So be wary of when people are putting stuff on there, and you've got to counteract it with the facts. But I'm telling you, don't fight with them. Don't fight with you. There's an old saying that says, when you get in the mud, let me see if I say this right. You get in the mud with the pigs like it, and you just get dirty. There's no sense in fighting with them, but you need to make sure that facts are out there. I put that last line on there because when I was in office and they would do that, they were just starting to do it on Facebook, and I went to my city attorney, who's an amazing city attorney, and he said, ignore it, nobody cares. That might have been the advice 15 plus years ago. That is not the advice now, because it goes back to that picture. You ignore it too long, it becomes fact, and that means you all are crooks. Do not ignore it. Put the facts out there. Now, I don't want to give your attorney a cardiac arrest over here, because this really worries attorneys when I say that out loud, because you guys have some liability out there on social media, okay? We could do a whole seminar on your liability out there on social media, okay? So I want you to always consult with her. But I'm telling you, you have to get facts out there to deal with the lies. And you're never going to be satisfied there. They're always going to come back with some bigger lie, and it's going to be awful. I apologize for that. I'm working on it. It's something I think about every day. When I get the conclusion, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to tell you how you fix it. But right now, I don't have that answer. So, almost done here. There's no such thing as fake news or alternative facts. I'm not making a political statement because I know that has been popular because we're in the presidential race. But facts are facts. Now, you can withhold certain facts. You can distort facts, I suppose. But in the end, facts are facts. They're like numbers. I like numbers. Numbers don't lie to you. In this community, when it comes to government, when it comes to the governance of this city, all you elected officials, determine what is fact or fiction. That's incumbent on you. So, again, I know this all ties together. Don't let the mob determine what a fact is. You guys put the facts out there of what is governance in Enid. Okay? That's your job. And then you have to manage that. You have to be the ones that determine what's right, what's wrong. Okay? Kind of try to give you a little bit of the tools along the way about how transparency and then putting facts out there. But don't let someone tell you that there's alternative facts. There's only facts in Enid, and only you guys determine what those are. Does that make sense? Because this one frustrates me. This one frustrates me a lot. And usually what people like to do is take a fact that might be this big, and they try to take it down to something this big and distort it and make it something that it's not. So sometimes it's as simple as you just telling the whole story. In fact, that's probably 90% of the time is just tell the whole story, and then you can deal with people that play with the facts. All right, last thing on this, and then one other thing, and we are done. All right, I'm sure Gerald has educated you guys about this, but I'm telling you, the one thing if you want to survive up here, know your budget. Who's new? Who's the new? You're the newest, right? Who's the next newest?
Probably me.
You? Do you know your budget, Mayor? I got questions.
I think I do.
Okay, good. Listen, I say this inevitably every year. I'll get a call from a new mayor. It sometimes happens several times a year. They'll call and they'll say, Mike, I want to know how to do this job right. I'm like, and I always tell them the same thing. Good. Let's schedule an appointment at OML. Bring your budget. They're like, bring my budget? I'm like, bring your budget. I said, all I have to do is read your budget, and I can tell you the priorities of this city. All the answers to what's happening in Enid are in your budget. You don't have to have a narrative. Just look at your categories and where you're investing your money and where your fund balances are. Look at all of those things, and I can tell you exactly what's happening in Enid. All the answers are there. Too many times we get elected officials. This might be my last story. I don't know. You know, guys can tell I like to tell stories. I'm mayor. I'm in my third year I write my own budget because I did a little bit of that at the legislature. I would write a budget, I would give it to my city manager and just say, here are my priorities, now you do your job. And if you, I always told him, I said, if you incorporate my stuff, great, if not, but these are what I'd like to see. He was always good to at least try and get some of my priorities in there. So I say that because I was really engaged in the budget process. We're in our budget workshop, we're about the third one deep, and they're just not reading their budget. And so I went in before the meeting and I put in one of the pages, the entire text of the Gettysburg Address. It was like on page 40. Gettysburg Address is not that long. I think it's 4 or 5 paragraphs. Put the entire text in there. And so we're talking, and I said, what do you guys think about page 40? Like, oh yeah, that's good. I'm like, really? Are you sure? Because I mean, that's a pretty important part of what we're doing. They go to our budget workbook and look, and then one of them actually reads it and says, oh, what is this? I'm like, read your damn budget. I mean, that sticks out like a sore thumb in a budget. So I knew they didn't read the budget. They didn't even skim it. I mean, you can't kind of get to this one page that's got a bunch of paragraphs in it. They didn't even take the time to skim it. But I had to do something to teach them a lesson, like you've got to read your budget. It is actually what you're elected to do, is to manage the funds of the citizens of Enid. That's what you got elected to do. So take that part of your job extra serious. Read your budget. We do budget workshops all the time at OML. I could do one every other day and that wouldn't be enough, because that's how deficient we are sometimes in understanding our budget. And no budgets are alike. Leroy will tell you this. I mean, he's probably seen 50 different styles of budgets in his career. Municipalities do it differently. So you probably do it different here in Enid. But there are some common threads in a budget. And but I won't go too deep into that. But what I'm telling you is know your budget. You'll be successful just sitting up here doing this job from every council meeting just by knowing your budget. Okay? And if you need help, call us. We'll help you. Promise. Okay. I'm going to go through these quick things. Just these are good party deals. 76% of Oklahomans live in municipalities. 91% of the state sales tax is generated from sales within municipalities. 80% of Oklahomans receive their water from municipal water systems. And then this one I do want to say, since this is the home of Brent Kissling, I think he would agree with this. We're the best economic developers in the state. I'm sorry. I get really offended at the Commerce Department when they come into a municipality and they say, we can help you this, or we know better. I'm like, we've been doing this so much longer. We do so much bigger projects. In fact, if they would stop trying to spend money on battery farms and things like that and invested in the kind of economic development we do in municipal government, the state would see a complete transformation there. But I will get off my soapbox on that. Okay, this is the last thing, and then I'm going to close this up because I think I got pretty close to time.
You're doing great.
Are we good? Okay. All right. Here's the last thing. This is actually the secret to your success. So everybody should pay attention to this one. There is one thing that municipal government has as a responsibility that no other part of government has solely. Okay. Now, when I say this, you'll understand. There might be parts that the governor does to improve this. There might be parts that the legislature does to help with this, and so on and so forth. But municipal government is the only part of government that is solely responsible for people's quality of life. Okay? Let me explain that to you. I'm going to do it with one more story, but this one I just created. I want you to imagine this world of Enid. You get up in the morning, you go to your bathroom, maybe use the bathroom, you get in to take a shower, you turn on the water, great hot water, good clean water, shave, do all that. Get ready for work. You go downstairs, you make some coffee, throw the coffee filter in the trash can, eat a little breakfast, grab the trash bag because it's trash day. You go outside, you toss the trash on the corner, put it in your poly cart. You get in your car, back out, driving down the street. Look, oh, Enid built another new fire station. Look at that. That's great. You pass a police officer on the way to work. Oh, there's that new park. There's City Hall. It's a good day in Enid. It's a good day in Enid. Now imagine this story. You wake up in the morning, you go to your shower, and you turn the spigot, and no water comes out. You get out, can't shave, got a beard down to your chin, off your chin. You go downstairs, you can't make coffee. Everybody's mad because there's no coffee. Your wife's yelling at you, or your husband's yelling at you. You grab the trash bag, you go out there and you toss it on the front yard because there was no polycart, but there's a pile of trash up to the sky. You pull out on a gravel street, you drive. Unfortunately, when you were at home, house caught on fire. There was no firefighter there to put it out. Your wife got mugged at, I guess, maybe, do we get mugged in Enid? Probably people don't get mugged in Enid, but just let's pretend in this world that your wife got mugged, at lunchtime at her work, but there was no police there to stop it. So which quality of life do you guys like better? Everything I talked about is stuff that we're responsible in municipal government. Whether people get caught up thinking when you say quality of life, they think, oh, I need to build a park. No, that's not quality of life. That's just an added benefit of quality of life. Quality of life is about where we raise our kids, where we worship, where we're with our friends, where we educate our kids. Those are things that make quality of life. You guys have a direct impact on quality of life. Everything that you do impacts the quality of life of the citizens of Enid. If you will just take that one concept and apply it to how you govern every day, you will be the most popular and successful elected officials in the history of this community. Because that's all we're looking for. That's all we're looking for is good quality of life, and that's your responsibility. Nobody else is going to do it. But think about that. Yes, school boards provide better quality of life in that area. Counties, I don't know what quality of life they provide, but we won't get into that. Sorry if there's any county commissioners listening. But think about it. Kamala Harris, Donald Trump have less impact as president on the quality of life of the citizens of Enid than you do. You have more power than the president to make sure people's quality of life is as best that it can be. Embrace that concept, and I tell you, there's nothing that can stop Enid. And you guys, listen, this is one of the finest, and I say that, and I do not say this to all my cities that I represent. This is one of the finest cities in the state of Oklahoma. And I'll tell you, and I'm getting off my topic, because I don't get to say this at NOI, but I do get to compliment you guys. You have the what I call the big three that works for you in Enid, works together in Enid. You have the city, you have your economic group, and I forget, is it Enid Economic?
ERDA.
ERDA, and the schools. You guys are all on the same page. I'm not saying you don't fight or disagree at times, but in the end, all three of those entities work together and look at what you do in this community. It's amazing because you guys have that cooperation. I wish that was the way it was in all of our municipalities, but it's not. You guys are unique. You're a bit of a unicorn. There's a handful of cities that work as well as you do in those three areas. You take any one of those three out of that team, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I can show you more examples of it not working than I can show you of it working. So continue to do that. Continue to focus on people's quality of life. I don't know if I provided you any great guidance tonight, but if you kind of stick to the transparency and just live on facts, I promise you things will continue to be great in the city of Enid. So I think the last slide, all that is all, I bash social media pretty good, but there's all of our social media, so feel free to use any of that. So with that, we got probably a few minutes. Any questions or thoughts? No?
Do you want to say a few things about future legislative priorities of OML while you're here? And
Sure.
the mayor may have something too. I didn't want to.
No, that's where I was
Might
headed.
be good if you.
Yeah. So we have three things on our agenda that we're going to present at conference. So just so you know, we present our legislative priorities to the entire membership, and then they vote on it. 3 doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not, because there's something bigger that I want to talk to you guys about tonight in that regard. We have our sewer wastewater backup. Do you have a bad problem with that here, Joe?
We do
A little
have our
bit?
challenges.
So you guys know that there's some laws, but sewer backs up in someone's house on your side of the fence, you owe them on their side of the fence, so.
That is not quality of life.
It is not
Sewer's
quality of
backing
life.
up, I can tell you.
Yeah, but there's especially one attorney in this state. He has some great commercials in Oklahoma City. I don't know if you get him here. He says he's the #1 lawyer in the #2 business, and he focuses on suing cities who have sewer backups. He's found a way around around the statutes where we should have tort caps that say it's only $125,000 per incident. Well, he's figured out and convinced the courts that the precedent now is it's $125,000 per person. So if you have a mom, a dad, and 3 kids, that's $125,000 times 5. OMAG's usually only paying out at the $125,000, depending on, there's circumstances, I don't want to get too deep in that, but a lot of times cities are stuck with that excess money. So sometimes it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I know you guys are doing well financially, but if you ask Gerald to take $500,000 out of his budget to pay a lawsuit, it's going to put you guys in a strain. We have come up with some sensible legislation that we think will help with that in helping cities avoid some of that liability. But yet, here's the weird thing about that. If somebody's, like you said, the quality of life of someone that has a sewer backup in their house, that breaks your heart when you see something like that. So we don't want to be unfair about that. We want to make sure that those folks are taken care of as well. So we've tried to come up with some common sense legislation that we think will try and limit the liabilities for cities but still protect citizens. We've been trying this one for about 3 years and we haven't found the right combination, but hopefully that this year is the one that we come. So that's one of our large priorities. Another carryover one that we have, gosh, I wish I had my legislative agenda in front of me. I'll think of the other ones as we go. But this is the one that I really want to tell you about. I purposely asked our legislative team to try and, now, I will tell you, the minute session starts and we start getting bills filed, that will grow. It'll by the time it's done, it'll have over 1,000 bills on it that we'll be tracking. Some of them will turn into priorities. Most of them we try and kill. I mean, we're the best hunters at the Capitol. We kill more things than they do during hunting season. But here's what I'm getting to, and I'm going to talk about this way more at conference. It's time for municipalities for our voice to be heard on taxation in this state. We are the only state where municipalities solely operate on sales tax. I can say that we have a little taste here and there of ad valorem tax, but we've never had our share of ad valorem tax. I don't actually know that ad valorem tax is going to be the answer to fixing our tax system in Oklahoma and helping municipalities see more revenue. I've been talking about it, and I would imagine that, Gerald, you guys probably have some bonds that are backed by sales tax, maybe out 30 years. We have a lot of questions, and we don't have a lot of answers yet. But what we believe is this is the year that we have to start the conversation on changing the tax system to be more beneficial to municipalities. I don't want to punish our friends at the county or the schools, but the truth is surviving on sales tax is too volatile. And when the economy is in bad times, we're in worse times. So we have to look at more stable sources of funding. I'm not sure what that's going to be in the end. We always say ad valorem tax, and it very well might be. But I will tell you that the state of Texas gives municipalities their authority to raise ad valorem tax in their municipality. It is not popular at the legislature. Where I can show my face at the state capitol in Oklahoma, the Texas Municipal League director cannot show his face at the Capitol in Texas. They do not like the Municipal League. They don't work well with them. And it all goes back to that whole thing because the legislators don't like seeing cities being able to raise ad valorem tax. It's a struggle. So I don't know that that's going to be the answer, but if we don't start asking the questions, if we don't start studying the problem, we're going to be in the same place that we are. So that's our big announcement this year. You're getting the early version of it, but I'm going to talk a lot more about it at conference. But that's the big thing. And when we do that, I believe that when we start to find the answers and municipalities understand that, and I believe that is that one unifying thing that I don't care if we're in Enid, Oklahoma City, Goaty Bow, Amber, wherever, that's the one thing that we're all going to get on board. And I'm really excited and maybe a little scared to see what happens at the state capitol when every single municipality is in agreement on an issue. And I think that we will move the needle up there. But there's just a lot of work to do. I think it's, some people have said we're probably looking at 3 years. I'm a little optimistic than that, or less optimistic than that. I think we're probably in a 5-year process to get this done. I think the first year is our own research, figuring out, coming and talking to you guys, figuring out what's happening in Enid, talking to you about how would this proposal affect you, and knowing that, we might do something that's really great for Enid, but it might not be great for a smaller community. So we have to take all that into account. And then I think that's a couple of years' work. And then I think it's going to be selling it for a couple of years, educating municipalities, because if we're all going to be on the same page, I have to make sure that we go to every city and do that level of education and make sure you guys understand. So then the last phase is going to the Capitol. And I want to make sure every mayor, every council member, every trustee is saying the exact same thing when we do that. So we're only going to get one shot at this. If we don't do it well, we'll probably won't for a long time. There'll be another OML director, another mayor, another city manager. It will be in this chamber. So we got to do it right. So I think it's a multi-year lift. But I think we're going to, I do believe that we can improve the financial situation of municipalities. So that's the big one, Mayor. So.
Very good. Any other comments?
I do have a question for you, Mike.
Yes, sir.
It's good to see you again
Good
as
to see
well.
you.
What type of impact do you think the grocery tax, the removal of the taxes on grocery, what type of impact do you think it would have on cities this size? I mean, Oklahoma City
Yeah.
and Tulsa is going to be different.
Oh, you remove completely the grocery sales tax from Enid, you're bankrupt. I promise you. How many Walmarts you have?
2.
2. Number one driver of sales, of revenue for municipalities is grocery tax, as far as sales tax. Number one, hands down. Now, let's put that into perspective, okay? I love that the governor is traveling the state, telling everyone how he has single-handedly, by getting rid of the grocery tax, helped every Oklahoman, poor, rich, whatever. Let's put the reality of what he really did, or the legislature really did. They eliminated a very small part of the grocery tax. They saved the average Oklahoman $3 a week. That's the real number. We did the research up and down. They did absolutely nothing. Here's the thing that is more concerning about that. It was about a $450 million hit to the state budget. I had a sneaking suspicion on the day after the primary election, and I looked at how many municipal bond elections were on ballots around the state. And so I started adding them up. They were almost the same amount. And my thought is this. They took $450 million out of the budget so the governor can walk around the state and say how he's saved poor Oklahomans $3 a week. What would have happened if they would have taken that $450 million and set it aside, if they didn't want it, set it aside and let our municipalities use that for these bond issues? It would have spread out, instead of asking, Enid to bear the cost of that, whatever that project is, if you could have spread that out throughout the whole state with a state fund, because they obviously didn't want the money. Think of the good that we could have done. Think about the quality of life that we could have done just in that one election cycle because they didn't want $450 million. Nobody is getting excited about going to Walmart and seeing that they saved $3 on their grocery bill. They don't even notice. My fear was this. When they first started, they said, we want to get rid of it altogether. We stood up and said, no, you can't do that. That will kill municipalities. Then they said, well, we'll take municipalities out of it. Like, well, we can kind of live with that, but here's what my fear is. If you do a wholesale elimination of grocery tax, that's a lot of money. And what my fear was is that people would notice that. And then they would go to the store and they would look on their receipt and they would see their sales tax on there. And then they would have come here and they would have said, Mayor, there's sales tax on there. The governor said I don't have to pay this. And you're saying, well, I'm sorry, that's a municipal portion. And then the person's confused because it just got complicated. And then you have to explain that. And then what they're going to do, they're going to say, well, that's wrong. Take the municipal sales tax off. And the mayor's like, well, I can't do that. It'll bankrupt the city. I don't care. The governor said, that's where I was worried we were going. In the end, they didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but they sure did take a lot of money out of their budget. And we're cash flush in Oklahoma today. I've worked in government long enough now that I've seen four cycles where the bottom has dropped out of our budget. Natural gas is kind of low right now, but the bottom drops out of oil tomorrow. We're in a bad budget situation next year at the Capitol. I mean, that's just the truth. So I wish they wouldn't mess with it, but I think if they're going to start messing with their sales tax, and when I was talking about the bigger picture about what we want to do, it seems to me that they don't seem to care about sales tax that much. I would be just fine if they decided that they're not going to charge their 4.85% anymore and let us charge it. I'd take that. That would be a good trade-off. I would stick with sales tax if we could have what the state has. Give us all of it. And then stop doing sales tax exemptions. That's another thing. There's over $1 billion worth of sales tax exemptions that impact municipalities, but that's another thing. But yeah, so it's an interesting one. That bill has come up. This is my 8th year as director. It's come up 7 of the 8 years that I've been director. We killed it every year because the legislature understood that that was just not an area to go down. And then for some reason last year, it kind of was when the Speaker of the House, who unfortunately is a former mayor, got behind it, that it got some steam. And that's when we had to really go into hyperdrive to make sure that we protected municipalities, because we saw it was going to pass. We knew they were going to do something. But again, $3 a week, average Oklahoman, they didn't do much. So,
Thank you.
absolutely. I hope that wasn't too much.
Anything else? Mike, thank you so much for being here. That was so informative. We appreciate it. I just think it's stuff that we've heard once, but we just need to be told that multiple times. And thank you for what OML does. You guys are just great partners, and we're certainly glad to be a part of that.
Well, we're glad to have you. Enid has been a very important part of OML. When I was first hired, my first president of OML was Bill Shuey. Bill Shuey is still to this day a dear friend of mine, and I actually have a standing invite to Thanksgiving and Christmas at Shuey's house anytime, so I'm pretty proud of that. I don't know how many people have that, but I'm pretty proud of that. So thank you, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. All right. Item 3.2, update on rezoning on Southern Heights Overlay District. Leroy, I think this is you.
I just keep coming back. At
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
our last meeting, it was presented to us to look at the rezoning the Southern Heights overlay rezoning district or overlay district, expand two-family duplex dwelling opportunities. So that's what our presentation is on tonight. Purpose, again, just like with manufactured housing, to encourage infill development on unused or vacant lots already served by existing infrastructure, water, sewer, and streets, to expand affordable and attainable housing opportunities. And the last one comes out of the housing study, to address the lack of housing variety, increase in diversity of housing styles that can help meet the variety of incomes, lifestyles, and life stages in our community. So that's kind of our purpose in this presentation. Topics we'll talk about, of course, the area, the Southern Heights Overlay District that we're looking at rezoning, the neighborhood input that we have received expressing the desire to rezone this area, talk about some information from the housing study of 2023 and our comp plan that was done in 2015 that supports the ideal of expanding housing opportunities, especially duplexes, and then talk a little bit about the difference between R2 and R4 so we know what we're getting into when we change the zoning district. And then finally, just the mechanics of rezoning, which most of you know the mechanics, but it's a little bit different because typically we deal with one piece of property and that owner comes in and asks to be rezoned. Here we're going to be representing a whole area, and so it makes it a little bit different process. I'm not going to read the intent and boundary, but when you look at this, it's the same boundary as the overlay district that we did for manufactured housing. Within that boundary, there are some areas that are already zoned different than R2. We won't be rezoning those areas, just the ones inside the boundaries that are R2. Neighborhood input expressing desire. At our July 25th town hall meeting, the residents that attended that town hall meeting, there was an expression or interest in looking at rezoning the Southern Heights Overlay District. And then again on August 6th, when we had our public hearing on the ordinances dealing with manufactured housing, several residents and citizens come forward at that public hearing and also expressed a desire. So we've had feedback or input from the neighborhood wanting us to look at the rezoning. Looking at the comprehensive plan, again, the 20-year forecast, 4,000 to 11,000 population increase is projected over the next 20 years for our community. The need for 4,200 additional housing units. The availability of housing units is not the only factor. It has to be the right type of housing at the right price points for our community, not just creating a larger number of units. In Garfield County, housing's dominated by detached or single-family units. 82% of our units are detached single-family units. That doesn't mean they're owner-occupied. It's just that they're standalone housing units. A lot of them are rental units. Enid has fewer housing choices today than the overall housing market in Oklahoma, United States. In other locations, there's a larger mix of rentals, whether they be apartments, townhouses, duplexes, than there are in Enid. So the variety of housing choice is more limited in Enid because, again, 82% of our housing stock is single-family built structures. As Enid continues to grow, the demand for housing is shifting from predominantly single-family houses to a greater mix and diversity of housing options. Some of the recommendations out of the comp plan was focus on increasing the amount of multifamily housing units in the city, encourage new infill housing, which we've been seriously looking at over the last few months. New infill housing in existing neighborhoods can help stabilize values and provide additional housing to meet demand. And then it recommended to look at updating zoning districts to allow for a mix of housing types. When you look at the housing study, again, projection of housing needs. In there, it projected Enid needs between 1,500 to 3,000 additional housing units by 2035. Over 560 units of affordable housing needed in the next decade. Moderate and low-income households cannot afford new construction cost of the traditional single-family detached housing. Not everybody makes an income that they can afford to buy a new single-family structure with today's cost. We have to provide housing opportunities for a whole mix of our community in the different socioeconomic levels. Seniors and those looking to downsize have few options. Increasing diversity of housing styles such as duplex, triplex, and condos can help meet the variety of incomes, lifestyles, and life stages. Enid needs options beyond apartments and detached single family, including duplexes, townhomes, and downtown living. Again, infill lots provide a great opportunity to reuse infrastructure.
Leroy,
to stabilize neighborhoods.
hold up one
I
second.
would've really
Let Mike
interrupted you.
take a look. He's looking for
I
his.
left my phone somewhere, but it's not there.
Well, don't grab mine over there.
It looks fine, I'll take care of it.
That's fine. You can take all the calls too. That's all right.
Sorry, Leroy.
That's
Go
all
ahead.
right. He's interrupted me before. If we look at the difference between the R2 single-family district and the uses and uses by review between R2 and R4, you see that the primary difference is when you go to R4, you're adding the ability to have two-family dwellings, which you don't have that ability as a permitted use in the R2 district. And then you also add the ability to have garage apartments. That's really the significant difference between the two zoning districts. When you look at area regulations and heights, again, they're pretty much the same. I would just point out that when you go to R4 and the duplexes, the minimum square feet for a duplex is 7,000 square feet as compared to 6,000 for single family. Again, pretty similar, not a lot of difference. This slide, I just want to point out, I took just a typical block in the Southern Heights neighborhood area. And the typical platted lot is 25 foot wide by 130 foot deep. And the majority of them, of the parcels, 2 lots have been combined. So most properties are 2 lots, which means they're 50 foot by 130 feet deep, 6,500 square feet. Again, I want to point out that when you look at duplexes under our zoning, the minimum lot area for a two-family dwelling is 7,000. So typically, you're dealing with a lot or a parcel of 6,500 square feet in the Southern Heights area. I've tried to provide some examples of that. If that's the standard that we stay with, then it would take 3 lots. And if you combine 3 parcels or 3 lots, a traditional parcel, and add another lot to it, you have 9,750 feet. So it would be a typical parcel plus an additional lot. Or another way, and you could do it 1,000 different ways. Another would be if you had 5 lots, then you could split the lot in the middle, and then you would have 8,125 square feet if you did that. If you had 5 parcels, you just split the lot in the middle. So those are some ways that you could do that. I just pointed out on this particular block that those 2 are landlocked by having residences next door, so there's no way to combine that particular parcel with another adjacent parcel to come up with the minimum 7,000. Just want to make sure everybody understands that, so that if we do this rezoning, that they don't have the concept, I could run out, I've got 2 lots, I can build a duplex. And I would point out, I did look at some other communities for comparison, and the minimum lot area for a duplex in Stillwater is 7,500 compared to our 7,000. In Edmond, it's 7,000, same as ours. And in Ponca City, it's 7,200. So when you look at other cities, the minimum area or square foot for a duplex is pretty typical with what ours are. With that, mechanics, we will need to go to an abstractor and obtain 2 separate lists. Typically, we only get 1 list from the abstractor because the applicant for the rezoning is already in favor of it because they're applying for it. In this case, the city's taking the action, so we're kind of representing the whole Southern Heights neighborhood. So we'll need 1 list of all the property within the Southern Heights overlay district and a separate list for the property laying within 300 feet of the exterior boundary. And in this particular case, we'll need more than just mailing addresses. We'll need to know the property owner, the property address, the mailing address, legal description, current zoning, and the lot area. We normally know that by the individual applicant, but since we're doing so many, we'll need to have this information. If we're given the green light to do this, this would be the first step, and next week, the city attorney and myself will work with an abstractor to request the list that we need to initiate the process. Some of the individuals that have done rezoning lately have indicated just getting the one list has been at least a couple of weeks. This is a little more complicated. I would say that at a minimum, it's going to probably take 30 days to get this list, to give you some idea of time frame as we go through this. The next is publish a notice. You publish a notice for 15 days in the newspaper. Typically, you have in the notice the list of the one piece of property you're going to rezone. In this notice, we'll have a list of every one of the properties that we are planning to rezone so that everybody knows when they look at, here's the properties we're proposing rezoning. So it'll be a bigger ad. The next step would be to mail a notice, and that's a 20-day process. We have to mail it out 20 days in advance. And again, it will involve mailing out two lists, one within the 300-foot radius and mailing a notice to all the properties inside the overlay district. Again, we will have to have a list of all the properties that we're proposing to rezone. So now you've looked at 30 days to get the list, and then you got at least 20 days to do the notice before it can go before the planning commission. So you're already up to roughly 2 months in the process. Post a sign. Typically, we post a very small sign on rezoning because we're dealing with one property. And this, point out, it says the lettering thereon shall be sufficient size so as to be clearly visible and legible from the public street. So instead of our typical small sign like a real estate sign, we'll have to have big signs made where you can read from the street and we'll probably put it on all 4 sides of the neighborhood. And then by state law, there's a protest option. One of them is if the owners of 20% or more of the area of the lots included in the proposed change, if they protested, I tried to give diagrams to point that out. So if this is the overlay district where we're rezoning, the Southern Heights overlay district, if property owners of 20% of the property in that area file a petition, then that creates the protest. The next step would be if 50% of the area inside plus the 300-foot area file a petition, then that would be another protest. If there is a protest, it does not mean that it cannot be rezoned. It just creates a need to have a supermajority. So instead of a simple majority adopting the zoning ordinance to rezone, you would have to have 5 votes instead of 4. And that's all the protest does. Then there would be public hearings, one before the Planning Commission. They would hold a public hearing. They would make a recommendation to the mayor and the Board of Commissioners, and then that would be followed by a second hearing before the mayor and Board of Commissioners. And then after that public hearing, the city council could consider adopting the ordinance to put the zoning in place. And of course, any ordinance that we adopt it doesn't have an emergency. It's 30 days before it actually goes into effect because you have to publish it. So if you think of it, you're probably looking at least a 90-day timeline or process at a minimum to go through this process. That's kind of what our understanding is, the directive you wanted us to look at, the process that we would have to go through. And as I indicated, if we're given the green light tonight, city attorney and I next week will start the process by working with an abstractor to get the mailing list and the information we need that we can start the process by doing the notices and those type of things. Be glad to entertain questions.
Yes, sir, Leroy. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. Can you give us an example of the process for permitted use versus use by review? Can you give us an example of each one, the process? If an individual comes into the city code or engineering and say, hey, I'd like to build a duplex or a house, what's the process between the two?
Okay, so each zoning district that you look at, there's two lists. And the first one in each of the zoning districts are the permitted uses. So you go down that, and if it is an item listed in there, like in R2, single family, you just come in, you've applied to get your building permit. The next list is a use by review. And use by review is normally something that's more intense than the other uses that are permitted by right. The process for that, you make a use by review application. We have to post the property for 7 days. It goes to the planning commission after that 7-day notice. They hold a public hearing, and there's about 6 factors in our ordinance they're supposed to consider when they look at that use by review. And if it satisfies all of those factors, then a planning commission can vote to approve that use by review. That's the final step unless there's a protest by either the applicant because they're not satisfied with the outcome or someone in the neighborhood. Then it comes to the city council for further review if there's a protest. And then the city council makes the final decision.
So can I do a follow-up question right here? So of what we're passing that would be covered under permitted use, give me an example of what would be considered over there that they would have to bring as a special use? What are we leaving off of this that they would have to then go do a special use?
Let me go back to
We've
that
talked about
slide.
duplexes, we've talked about, just help me understand what it would be that they would have to come ask for.
If you look at page 8 in the presentation, if you want to refer back to it. On the left-hand side is the R2 district, and on the right-hand side is the R4. And you can see we are adding, when we rezone for permitted use, you can already do a 1 single family now as a permitted use. We will be adding a 2-family or duplex dwelling as a permitted use. So as long as you've got the 7,000 square feet, all you do is come in and do your permit application for your building permit, bring a plot plan. We have to know if we don't have any pins, we have to have it surveyed so we know where it's at. So it's a very simple process. If you look at the list below, those are things that are used by review. And so a child care center, and these lists are identical. So we're not changing the things the same use by review as in R2 is in R4. Group home, large family childcare, municipal use or buildings, public utilities, nursing home, plant nursery, private clubhouse, we've experienced that one, library, and religious institutions. So a church, if they buy a piece of property in R2 or R4, and we have one of those now that's looking at, they bought a private residence, they're looking at turning it into a study for church. They will have to go through the use by review process. So that gives you the list of the different factors or uses in R2 and R4 that would be permitted and the ones that would have to go by use by review. And each zoning district has uses permitted and then uses by review.
And in the other area, the Webster edition, was it the
Correct.
Webster
Yes, sir.
edition? Which is already R4, they would have to follow the use by review as well, right?
For the things that I read that were used
Yes,
by
sir.
review, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we're just basically lining both of those additions up so that they're the exact same zone.
They would match.
Anything that's zoned R4 has the exact same permitted uses and use by review.
Correct. The only difference would be in the Southern Heights, because traditionally, the way the lots were laid out, 25 foot wide by 130 feet deep. When you add two of those up, you get to 6,500. So you're going to have to do some lot combos, lot splits to get that, or add three lots together. Whereas in the Webster area that we did it, those lots are 25 by 140. So when you put two of those together, you have the 170 or 7,000 square feet. So we'll have to work with people. That's a pretty simple process of doing the lot splits and those kind of things. But it will be one step that they may have to do in order to have the land area required for a duplex.
Is there a reason we can't make an exception since the lots are already set up that way to have the minimum be 6,500? Seems less
I'm not
complicated.
a legal expert, but my understanding, if you can't change, if you got a zoning district like R2, R4, R4 can't be one way in one part of town and R4 a different way in another part of town. So if you were going to change that 7,000 to 6,500, you'd have to change it for all of the R4 zoning across the board, is my understanding. Because you can't separate, if you're going to say it meets R4, then they all should be the same. But yes, you could do it, but you just have to do it for the entire
I think we need to
R4.
jump into, there's some way to do it. Leroy just told us we could do it. But one thing we need to keep in mind when we do these large overlay type rezonings of areas, it wasn't designed to be R4 in the beginning, or the lots probably would have been laid out. That's part of why. It doesn't mean that it can't be. And so what Leroy is just pointing out is just minor differences that could cause issues, and he's wanting to make sure that you all understand. And then it does factor in, do we want to try to do more? I guess you could. I guess you could change R4 requirements citywide, but it would affect R4 requirements everywhere.
And I tried to do some research on the internet and look at minimum for duplexes and why 7,000 square feet. And there was a lot of information, but if you think about it, if you got 50 foot wide, by the time you take 5 feet off on each side, then that leaves you 40 feet. So you got 20 feet for each side of the duplex. So you're getting pretty tight. And then you think about each one of them has to have 2 parking places. So when you get below 7,000, you're kind of getting a pretty tight fit for the type of duplex that you might be able to build there. And that would be a factor that you'd want to consider.
Okay.
You want to continue, Mayor? After, want to continue doing the?
Yeah, I want to continue later on. Leroy, thank you. You've taken all of our time up. And it's just a joke.
I'm gonna be honest, I enjoy this stuff. I mean, I really do.
Better than Mike's presentation, huh?
So I want to break right here. We're right up at 6:30. I'm going to adjourn and we'll come back at 20 minutes till 7, and then we'll take this up again on that line item. So we are adjourned.